Enough already, just remove the AOE cap. We tested it for 2 expansions, it's not as fun and it doesn't seem to help balance the specs in the game. Not only that, the initial reasoning behind the AOE cap has been fixed 1 season later, and removing the AOE cap can and will revitalize the Mythic Plus system. Let me tell you why. Mythic Plus has undergone a lot of changes in the last few patches. We got rid of the seasonal affixes and have been playing with a rotating pool of dungeons. This on top of losing annoying affixes and gaining 3 new ones. But there is one issue remaining that needs to be addressed: the AOE cap. Listen, it's going to happen. We are slowly moving into a world with less and less AOE cap, and the devs are trying to be way too careful about removing it. I say, fuck it, remove it all. It's not fun to hit fewer targets. Period. The initial argument was made against the degenerative pulls we used to have in BFA, where you would non-stop pull until you reached a boss or a decent way into the key. But that was fun. That was way more fun, and we can and will talk about why AOE cap sucks. Why it has some good points as well though. But all of that doesn't matter when fun is concerned, because at the end of the day, do you really care how good for the game a thing is if it is less fun? And aren't we all playing a video game here? What's the purpose of making it less fun? If uncapped AoE can be recognized by the majority as being more fun than feeling like you are limping through the many targets present, hitting a few at a time, then what more reasons can we still take for still having the restriction imposed? Who cares? Make the game more fun. When it's more fun, people enjoy it more, buy it more, play it more. How is this not a win-win for everybody? It's a bit of an exaggeration, but maybe not as big as you may think. Things are simple as much as we want to make them complicated. Make the game fun, people play it, done. Mythic Plus right now is suffering from an issue that kind of proves removing AoE cap is the solution to it. The wall that people start hitting in Season 3 is a survivability wall, and that's what's stopping them from pushing keys and even inviting less tanky specs. But what does this have to do with AoE cap, Flame? Well, being a Patreon answers these questions more often than you think, and it sponsors these videos as well. By clicking on the link down below and checking out our patreon.com/MarcelianOnline page, you will be helping us keep the lights on and make more of this content, and also get some cool perks along the way, like early access to videos and custom-made 4K wallpapers with character transmogs on them, your characters. Plus, you will earn our undying gratitude for being a part of the Patreon team. And that's because the survivability issue does have something to do with the AoE cap. First of all, I think most people can agree that being too squishy shouldn't be the first wall you hit when pushing scaling content. The wall we used to have was a throughput wall, aka a need more damage wall or need more healing wall. But Flame, isn't the HPS wall what we have now? Nope. The issue isn't healers not being able to keep up, it's people getting one shot, and it feels terrible to play. Alternatively, the other wall of needing more damage was more forgiving for people to play all specs and enjoy the game, and we were doing relatively the same level keys where we reach into the early 30s at the end of an expansion. And here is where the AoE cap comes into play, or how the removal of it would make Mythic Plus more interesting and exciting for people. We established that being able to fight 20-30 mobs at once is fun. You do big numbers in the millions. How is that not fun? And by not having an AoE cap, we can push higher and higher keys, which is again great because people like bigger numbers. Nobody in their right mind thinks,
I hope we can stop pushing around plus 30s because the numbers are scaring me.
No. Most people would want to push keys as high as they can possibly push them. You cannot push forever, of course. There has to be a limit, a soft or hard one, preferably the former. And to reach a limit that's satisfying to the majority of the player base, we would have to have a limit of throughput, and maybe leave the tankiness to the tank. And what better way to guarantee that most people will push higher than they ever could than by removing the AoE cap? So unlimited AoE potential makes for a more fun gameplay, makes for a more interesting ladder climb, and makes for a more interesting spec expression. If that is not enough to advocate for the removal of AoE cap, let me give you a few more. The initial argument of people pulling too much is, sorry to say, outdated and silly. Let me have fun. But also, I kind of agree if the strategy of a key would always be to pull everything. Some gameplay variety is important, and because of that, initially there was an argument to support AoE cap. But that problem can be solved and has been solved ever since, even without ever needing AoE caps. And the solution is caster mobs. And well, mobs that can be designed in a way where you cannot keep pulling more. Let's take Murozond's Rise as an example. The first room cannot realistically be pulled all at once. There are too many casts that need to be stopped. You have the regular casts, but also the volleys you want to definitely interrupt. And that's only one part of it. The second are the 3 lieutenant mobs present. The giant dude that puts a damage reduction bubble, which would make it a pain to kill everything in it. The maiden chick that shoots the orb that stuns and or kills ranged players if not dodged. And lastly, the serpent dude that leaps to an area, encases itself in a bubble, and incapacitates a party member, something that needs an interrupt to stop by going in the bubble in the line of sight. And all of these lieutenant mobs cannot be crowd controlled. The only way these pools can be amassed in a degenerate way is with AoE silence, AoE stuns for every instance of the cast that would require a stop. And there just isn't a party that can do that, with the exception of maybe 4 Vengeance Demon Hunters and a Protection Paladin. The possibility of making pools like these in a degenerative and consistent manner across all seasonal dungeons is incredibly unlikely, to the point that if a party actually manages to pull it off, they deserve to be able to AoE it down with no restrictions. Throughout the last 7 seasons of Mythic Plus, we have had no shortage of pack designs that make Giga Pools not only difficult, but impossible for almost the entire community. And I am talking about people that play within their key range and not doing +2 dungeons with fully mythic geared characters that can just one-shot 50 mobs at a time before they even cast one spell. No. But that would also be pretty sick to do, right? So the argument that uncapped AoE just makes for degenerative gameplay doesn't hold water anymore. What else is there to advocate against uncapped AoE? Class balance? Well, the top spec clearing content right now is Outlaw with a 8 to 9 target cap, while Affliction's Seed of Corruption is uncapped, yet it sits at the bottom of the meta. So capped or uncapped AoE has little to do with class balance and clearly not a good tuning knob to keep specs relatively close to each other. You do end up in situations where the AoE cap starts to just feel bad while also being bad. Take Enhancement Shaman as an example. The spec can hit 5 to 6 targets really hard, but that really hard starts to feel less hard when the pools measure more than 8 to 10 targets, where some specs like Balance Druid can just hit all of them with Starfall. Tanks can already hit all of them because they need to be able to hold aggro, and Enhancement loses more and more damage the more targets it fights. How does that make sense in a combat-focused RPG? How are you telling me I am doing proportionally less damage the more targets I have to fight? The argument for it can be that specs need to have their own identity and niche, and I agree. But does that have to come with forced limitations? Because if it does, then this creates spec designs where the imbalance becomes bigger. In order to tune enhancements 5 to 6 targets cleave to feel like it compensates for the fact that it cannot hit 8 targets or more, then Enhance would have to hit those 5 targets harder than everybody else that can hit more than 5. Then if you end up with dungeons where you cannot pull more than 5 targets because of the reasons I mentioned, every other spec will feel like shit. So essentially, we are trading feelings of shit of situation A for situation B. But why does this have to be a part of the game? Why not just opt for degenerative fun instead? Wasn't the degenerativeness of corruptions in 8.3 why the patch was massively popular despite the entire expansion having negative receptions? Didn't that prove that if you make the game fun, despite it being imbalanced, people will enjoy it? Because if you had to choose between fun imbalance and boring tuning, what would you choose? Not to mention that current meta, boring but balanced, isn't even balanced that much to begin with. So clearly the formula isn't working on top of making the Mythic Plus season less interesting and exciting than it could be. I'm not going to deny the positive leaps and bounds the Mythic Plus landscape has undergone. The Dragonflight changes are the best things that it has going for it as far as I'm concerned. All I am saying is that if we can have the game be better and more fun, why not have that as well? With a constantly rotating dungeon pool, consistent class tuning, and reworks that were necessary, uncapped AoE feels like the right addition to capitalize on what makes Mythic Plus fun. Stupid big fights with a lot of monsters where you take your geared character for an unchallenged and unquestioned massacre of DPS glory. Which is funny because that's exactly what enhancement feels like, ironically enough. We made a video going over all the cool stuff that makes enhancements so good, so check it out and add it to your alt army before it gets nerfed.